The King's Decree. In a faraway galaxy, there existed a grand kingdom known as Zorath. It was home to 4 beautiful princesses, Lyra, Elara, Nia, and Zara. Each princess was unique, with a strength of character that shone like the stars. However, they all shared one thing in common. They often laughed at the humans of Earth. "They are weak and foolish," they would say, shaking their heads in amusement. Little did they know that their lives were about to change forever. The kingdom's ruler, King Sulfur, was wise and powerful. He had fought many battles and brought peace to his realm. But now, as he lay on his deathbed, he felt a heavy weight on his heart. He knew that his daughters needed guidance and a leader who could help them see beyond their own worlds. "I must make a choice," he whispered to himself, his voice weak but firm. He reached for a golden scroll, a symbol of his authority, and began to write his final decree. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting a golden glow over the kingdom, the princesses gathered in the royal chamber. They were dressed in their finest gowns, shimmering like stars. "Father has called us," Lyra said, her voice filled with curiosity. Elara rolled her eyes, probably to lecture us again about our duties. Nia and Zora exchanged glances, unsure of what to expect. King Selther's voice filled the chamber as he spoke from his bed. "My dear daughters, I have summoned you for an important reason." The princesses leaned closer, eager to hear what he had to say. "As I approach the end of my reign, I must choose who will lead you, but it will not be a nobleman from our kingdom. It will be a human from Earth." The princesses gasped in disbelief. "A human? Father, that is ridiculous," Elara exclaimed, her eyes wide. "They are nothing like us. They are weak and primitive." King Sulfur raised a hand to silence them. "You do not understand. It is time for you to learn humility and strength in unexpected places. This human will inherit my kingdom and rule by your side." The princesses looked at each other, confusion and disbelief in their eyes. "What kind of human could possibly be worthy of our kingdom?" Nia whispered. King Sulfur smiled softly. "You will find out soon enough. I have chosen someone special, someone who will teach you the value of courage, friendship, and love." With that, he rolled up the scroll and sealed it with his royal emblem. "This is my final decree. You must accept this challenge, or face the consequences of your own arrogance." The princesses felt a chill run down their spines. They had always been proud and confident, but now they felt a sense of dread. "Father, you cannot be serious," Zora pleaded. "This is our kingdom. How can we trust a mere human?" King Sulfur's expression grew serious. "You will learn to see beyond your prejudices. Your new path begins now." As the princesses left the chamber, they felt a mix of anger and fear. How could their father do this? They had spent their lives believing they were superior to humans. But now, they would have to work with one. The thought made them uneasy. Would this human be able to handle the responsibilities of the kingdom? Could they ever respect someone from Earth? The princesses walked through the palace halls, their minds racing with questions. Little did they know that their lives were about to intertwine with a human in ways they could never imagine. A journey of laughter, learning, and unexpected bonds was just around the corner. The king's decree had set in motion a series of events that would change their lives forever. The inheritance. On Earth, in a small town, lived a young man named Jake. He was an ordinary guy with a simple life. He worked at a local grocery store, spent weekends with friends, and dreamed of adventure beyond his mundane routine. Little did he know that his life was about to take a turn he could never imagine. One sunny afternoon, Jake received a strange letter in the mail. The envelope was made of thick, golden paper, and it shimmered in the light. He frowned, wondering who would send him something so fancy. As he opened the envelope, a golden scroll rolled out. Confused, he read the words written in elegant script. "To the chosen heir, Jake of Earth, you are the inheritor of the kingdom of Zorath. You are summoned to take your rightful place as a leader. The princesses await your arrival." Jake rubbed his eyes. thinking he was dreaming. What is this? A joke. He glanced around his small apartment, half expecting to see hidden cameras. But the letter was real, and it felt heavy in his hands. The Kingdom of Zoreth. 4 alien princesses. It all sounded like something out of a movie. At first, Jake thought it was a prank. He laughed, thinking of how his friends loved to tease him. But deep down, a spark of curiosity ignited in him. What if it were true? What if he could have an adventure? His heart raced at the thought. Without thinking twice, he decided to find out more. The letter instructed him to go to a specific location in the woods outside his town. As the sun began to set, Jake made his way there. He followed a winding path, feeling both excited and nervous. What if this is all real? He wondered, what if I really become a king? When he reached the clearing, Jake saw a shimmering portal glowing with vibrant colors. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and he felt a strange pull towards it. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward and entered the portal. In an instant, everything changed. Jake found himself standing in the grand palace of Zoreth. The air was filled with a sweet fragrance, and he could see the stunning architecture that sparkled like diamonds. But before he could take in the beauty, 4 princesses stood before him, their expressions a mix of disbelief and amusement. Is this the human? Lyra, the eldest, asked, raising an eyebrow. He looks ordinary. Ilara smirked. He's nothing like a royal. How can he possibly lead us? Nia and Zora exchanged glances, unsure of what to think. Jake felt their judgment like a weight on his shoulders. He took a step forward, his heart pounding. Hi, I'm Jake. I think I'm here because of a will, or something. The princesses burst into laughter, their voices ringing like music. Jake felt embarrassed, but also determined. Look, I don't know how this happened, but I'm here to help. I might not be a prince, but I'm willing to learn. Lyra crossed her arms, still skeptical. Help? How can you help us? You are just a human. We have lived in luxury and power all our lives. I may be ordinary, Jake replied, but I have ideas. Maybe I can bring something fresh to your kingdom. You might find I have a lot to offer. The princesses fell silent, surprised by his confidence. Maybe this human had a spark of something special after all. Just then, King Sulphur's voice echoed through the hall. Welcome, Jake. You are the chosen heir, and your adventure begins now. As Jake looked around at the princesses, he felt a mix of fear and excitement. Would he be able to win their respect? Could he truly lead a kingdom? The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Jake's ordinary life was now behind him, and a grand adventure awaited him in Zoreth. The first encounter. As the sun rose over the kingdom of Zoreth, Jake stood nervously in the grand throne room. The room was enormous, with tall, sparkling windows that let in streams of light. Colorful banners hung from the walls, and a beautiful tapestry showed the history of Zoreth. But Jake was not here to admire the art. He was here to meet the 4 princesses again, and he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Moments later, the large doors creaked open, and the princesses entered. Lyra led the way, her long hair flowing behind her like a golden river. Ilara followed, her expression confident yet slightly mocking. Nia and Zora walked in behind her, looking curious and hesitant. As they approached, Jake took a deep breath, ready to make a good impression. Welcome back, human, Lyra said, her voice smooth but her eyes sharp. Did you sleep well, or were you too busy dreaming about ruling a kingdom? Jake forced a smile, feeling the pressure. I slept fine, thanks. I've been thinking about how I can help you all. Ilara crossed her arms, a sly grin on her face. Help us? That sounds amusing. What could you possibly know about ruling a kingdom? Jake felt a flush of embarrassment, but pushed through. Well, I might not know much about ruling, but I know how to connect with people. I believe that understanding and teamwork are important for any leader. The princesses exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of skepticism and intrigue. "Connect with people?" Nea asked, tilting her head. "What do you mean?" Jake took a step closer, gaining a bit of confidence. "In my world, it's essential to listen to people and work together. I might not have royal experience, but I have ideas on how to make things better for everyone in the kingdom." Zara raised an eyebrow. "What kind of ideas?" Before Jake could respond, Ilara interrupted. "This is just silly. A human giving us advice. What can he teach us?" Jake felt frustrated. "Look, I know I'm not a princess or a warrior, but I can bring a different perspective. Sometimes an outsider can see things that others miss." Lyra studied him closely, her expression softening just a little. "Fine, let's hear your ideas, then. If you can convince us, maybe we won't dismiss you completely." With that, Jake shared his thoughts on how to improve the kingdom. He suggested ways to connect with the people of Zoreth, encouraging the princesses to go into the villages and listen to their concerns. He also talked about planning events to celebrate the diversity of their culture. At first, the princesses listened with skeptical faces, but slowly their expressions began to change. Naya looked thoughtful, and even Ilara's smirk faded as she considered his words. "Those ideas might actually help us," Naya said slowly. "We often forget that our people have their own struggles." Jake smiled, feeling a rush of hope. "Exactly. Together, we can make Zoreth a place where everyone feels valued." Ilara folded her arms but nodded slightly. "Maybe you're not as foolish as I thought, but you'll have to prove it." Just then, King Sulphur's voice echoed again, this time with a hint of pride. "You see, my daughters, even the simplest human can bring wisdom if you only take the time to listen." The princesses looked at each other, a new understanding beginning to form among them. Perhaps this human was not so ordinary after all. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had made a small step forward. But he knew that gaining the respect of 4 strong princesses would take time and effort. Still, he was determined to prove himself and show them that leadership could come in many forms. As the meeting continued, Jake felt a flicker of hope in his heart. Maybe, just maybe, he belonged here after all. Clash of cultures. Days turned into weeks, and Jake quickly settled into life in the kingdom of Zoreth. He spent his mornings in meetings with the princesses, sharing ideas and learning about their world. But as time passed, the differences between their cultures became more apparent, leading to unexpected challenges. One sunny afternoon, the princesses invited Jake to a traditional Zorethian feast. Excited, he thought it would be a great opportunity to bond with them and learn more about their customs. The grand dining hall was filled with colorful dishes from different regions of the kingdom, each more exotic than the last. The table was adorned with sparkling crystals and vibrant flowers, creating an atmosphere of celebration. As the feast began, Jake eagerly reached for a dish filled with bright, glowing fruits. "What are these?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Those are lumina berries," Lyra replied, her tone proud. "They are a delicacy here." Jake took a bite, expecting a sweet taste. Instead, the moment he chewed, his mouth exploded with a flavor that was a mix of sweet and sour. "Whoa!" he exclaimed, eyes watering slightly. "That's intense." The princesses laughed, but not in a mean way. "You'll get used to it," Ilara said, smirking. "Just don't overdo it at once." While Jake tried to adjust to the unfamiliar flavors, he noticed the princesses began discussing a recent battle against a neighboring kingdom. "We showed them our strength," Zara said, her voice full of excitement. "They will think twice before challenging us again." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but wouldn't it be better to find a way to talk things out? Maybe peace is a better solution than fighting. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to him. "What do you mean?" Nia asked, a hint of annoyance in her voice. "We can't show weakness. Our kingdom must be strong." Jake frowned. "I understand strength is important, but sometimes showing compassion can be stronger." If you fight every time there's a disagreement, won't that just lead to more conflict? Ilara rolled her eyes. You have no idea how our world works. You think you can just come in and change everything. I'm not trying to change everything, Jake replied, his voice rising slightly. I just think there are other ways to handle things. The tension in the room grew thick, and the atmosphere shifted. The princesses were not used to being challenged, especially by a human. Jake felt frustrated, realizing that his ideas were not always welcomed. Later that evening, he found himself wandering the gardens, trying to clear his head. The flowers were blooming, and the stars twinkled above, but he couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment. He had hoped to bring fresh ideas and unite their worlds, but it seemed he was only creating more distance. As he sat on a bench, lost in thought, Lyra appeared beside him. You left the feast early, she said quietly, taking the seat next to him. I don't know if I fit in here, Jake admitted, looking up at the night sky. I want to help, but it feels like I'm just making things worse. Lyra sighed, her expression softening. We are not used to someone like you. We have always relied on strength and power. Your views are different. Maybe that's what Zorath needs, Jake said. A different perspective. I want to help you all see that strength isn't just about fighting. It's about understanding. Lyra nodded slowly, contemplating his words. It will take time for us to understand, but maybe we can learn from each other. As they sat together under the stars, Jake felt a glimmer of hope. The clash of cultures was challenging, but perhaps it was also an opportunity. If they could find common ground, they might just be able to create a brighter future for both their worlds. A growing bond. As the weeks passed in Zorath, Jake and the princesses began to find a rhythm. Despite their cultural differences, they started to build a bond that was both surprising and heartwarming. The initial clash of ideas had turned into something more, an understanding that began to grow with each passing day. One afternoon, Jake suggested they hold a community event to celebrate the kingdom's diversity. Let's invite the villagers to the palace, he proposed excitedly. We can showcase their talents and show them that we care about their lives. The princesses exchanged glances, their initial skepticism replaced with curiosity. What do you have in mind? Lyra asked, her tone more open than before. Jake smiled, feeling encouraged. We could have music, dancing, and storytelling. Each village has its own unique culture, and we can learn so much from them. Plus, it'll show that we value their contributions to our kingdom. Nia clapped her hands together, her eyes sparkling. That sounds amazing. I know some great musicians from my village. Zara nodded, her usual cool demeanor softening. And I can organize a dance performance. The villagers will love it. Ilara, though still cautious, added, I suppose we could learn something from this. But we have to make sure everything goes perfectly. With their excitement building, the princesses and Jake began planning the event. They worked late into the evenings, discussing ideas and assigning tasks. For the first time, Jake felt like he was part of a team. As the day of the event approached, the palace buzzed with energy. Colorful banners were hung, and tables were set up in the garden, filled with delicious food from various regions. Jake watched as the princesses put their hearts into the preparations. He saw the determination in their eyes, and it made him proud to be part of something special. On the day of the event, the garden was filled with laughter and music. Villagers arrived, dressed in their colorful attire, and Jake felt a wave of joy wash over him. He stood with the princesses at the entrance, welcoming everyone with warm smiles. Look at them, Jake exclaimed, glancing at the villagers mingling with the princesses. They're all so happy to be here. The princesses nodded, their expressions changing from skepticism to joy. As the music began, they joined in, dancing alongside the villagers. Jake felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. As the evening wore on, stories were shared, and friendships blossomed. Villagers showcased their talents, from singing to intricate dance performances. Jake even joined in, attempting to dance, which made everyone laugh. Not bad for a human, Nia teased, clapping her hands in delight. Jake grinned, feeling lighter than ever. He noticed the princesses laughing and enjoying themselves, their earlier reservations fading away. It was clear that they were learning to embrace the joy of connection. Later in the evening, Jake gathered everyone around to share his own story. "I come from a small town where community is everything," he said, his voice steady. "I learned that listening to one another can create amazing bonds. Today, I feel like we are becoming a true community, united in our differences." The crowd cheered, and the princesses looked at Jake with newfound respect. They had seen his passion and realized he truly cared for their kingdom and its people. As the stars twinkled above, Jake felt a warmth in his heart. He had come to Zorath as an outsider, but now he felt like part of a family. The princesses, once distant, were now friends, and together they were building a brighter future for their kingdom. That night, as they watched the villagers celebrate, Jake realized that despite their differences, they had found something powerful, a bond that transcended cultures and united them as one. The threat emerges. The success of the community event brought a new spirit to the kingdom of Zorath. The villagers felt valued, and the princesses had learned the importance of connection. However, beneath the joy of the celebrations, a dark shadow was beginning to gather on the horizon. One evening, while Jake was reviewing plans for future events with the princesses, a guard burst into the throne room, his face pale and anxious. "Your Highnesses, we have urgent news," he announced, breathless from running. The princesses turned to him, their expressions shifting from excitement to concern. "What is it?" Lyra asked, her voice steady but worried. "The neighboring kingdom of Vorath is mobilizing its army. They are preparing for an attack," the guard replied, his voice shaking. A chill ran through the room, and Jake's heart sank. "Why would they attack us?" he asked, feeling the weight of uncertainty. Ilara clenched her fists. "They must see our recent unity as a threat. They've always envied our wealth and power." Nia frowned, her brows furrowed. "We must prepare. They cannot destroy what we have built." As the guard relayed more information, Jake felt a rising sense of urgency. "What can we do to stop them?" "We need a plan," he said, trying to think of solutions. Lyra looked at Jake, admiration shining in her eyes. "You're right, but we cannot rely solely on strength. We need to find a way to communicate with Vorath. Perhaps there is still a chance for peace." Ilara shook her head. "They will not listen to a human. They see us as weak, and they certainly won't listen to you." "Maybe I can help," Jake replied, feeling a spark of determination. "I can reach out to them. If they see that we are willing to talk, it might change things." Zara raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Do you really think they would take a human seriously?" "I think they might if I speak from the heart," Jake insisted. "I want to show them that our strength lies in our unity, not in fighting." "It's worth a try, isn't it?" The princesses exchanged glances, unsure but intrigued. Finally, Lyra nodded. "We should give him a chance, but we must also prepare for the worst. We cannot let our guard down." That night, as Jake lay in his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling of dread. He had come to Zorath with hopes of unity and friendship, but now a war threatened everything they had built together. What if his efforts to reach out failed? What if Vorath chose to fight instead? The next day, Jake prepared to send a message to the leaders of Vorath. He wrote carefully, expressing the desire for peace and understanding. He highlighted the new bonds that had formed in Zorath, and how fighting would only tear them apart. Once the message was ready, a brave knight offered to deliver it. Jake felt a mix of hope and fear. "Please tell them I want to talk, and I'm willing to listen," he urged. As the knight rode off, Jake couldn't help but feel that he was putting everything on the line. Back at the palace, the atmosphere grew tense. The princesses organized training sessions for their guards and prepared for a potential attack. The sounds of swords clashing and voices shouting filled the air, creating a sense of urgency. Days passed with no word from Voreth. Each day brought new anxiety, and Jake's heart felt heavy. He watched the princesses train, their determination inspiring him, but also filling him with worry. Would his message ever reach the right ears? Just when Jake thought hope was fading, a figure appeared on the horizon. It was the knight returning. As he approached, Jake's heart raced with anticipation. Had the message been delivered? The knight dismounted and walked towards them, his face grim. "They received your message," he said slowly, "but they are not interested in peace. They are gathering their forces for an attack." Jake's heart sank. It felt like a storm was brewing, and he knew they had to prepare for the worst. The time for action had come, and the fate of Zoreth hung in the balance. Would they stand strong together, or would the darkness of war tear them apart? The showdown. The day of the showdown dawned over the kingdom of Zoreth, and a heavy tension hung in the air. Jake stood at the palace gates, watching as the sun rose slowly, casting a warm glow on the soldiers preparing for battle. It felt surreal to him. Just weeks ago, he had been planning community events, and now, the kingdom was on the brink of war. "Jake," Lyra called, rushing over, her armor shining in the light. "We need you at the front lines. The guards are ready, and we want you by our side." He nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm ready, but we must remember to focus on strategy and communication, not just fighting." Ilara approached, her eyes fierce. "We are prepared for battle. We will defend our home. If they attack, we will not back down." As the princesses gathered their forces, Jake felt both admiration and fear. They had trained hard and were determined to protect their kingdom. He wanted to contribute, but he also wished to find a way to avoid violence. Hours later, the soldiers stood in formation, ready to defend Zoreth. The air was thick with anticipation as they awaited the arrival of the Voreth army. The princesses took their places at the front, Jake standing beside them, his heart racing. Suddenly, the sound of hooves echoed in the distance. The ground trembled as the Voreth army approached. Their banners flew high, dark, and intimidating. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to the princesses, who stood tall and fierce, but he could see the uncertainty in their eyes. "Remember," Jake said, his voice steady but soft. "If there's a chance for peace, we should take it." Lyra nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "We will defend our kingdom, but we will also look for an opportunity to negotiate." As the Voreth army drew closer, the tension peaked. The commander of the Voreth forces, a tall man with a fierce gaze, raised his sword. "Zoreth, surrender or face the consequences," he shouted, his voice booming across the battlefield. Jake felt a wave of fear wash over him. "Now's our chance," he whispered to the princesses. "Let me speak." Before they could object, Jake stepped forward, holding his hands up to signal peace. "We do not want war," he shouted, his voice strong yet filled with urgency. "We want to talk. We want to understand each other." The Voreth commander narrowed his eyes, surprise flickering across his face. "A human speaks for you. This is foolishness." "Let me explain," Jake continued, feeling the weight of the moment. "We have built something beautiful in Zoreth. We have united our people and embraced our differences. Why destroy that? We can find a way to coexist." The soldiers on both sides looked uncertain. The tension in the air thickened as the Voreth army began to murmur among themselves. "Enough of this," the commander roared, his patience wearing thin. "We came to conquer, not to talk." "Wait," shouted Lyra, stepping forward. "We have no desire for war either. Our people only want peace and security. We are not your enemies." Jake's heart raced as he watched the situation unfold. The princesses were stepping up, showing bravery in the face of danger. "If we fight, we will only bring destruction to both our kingdoms," Jake pleaded. "Let us share our stories and find a better way forward." The Voreth commander hesitated, glancing back at his soldiers. He could see the doubt in their eyes, and for a moment, Jake thought he might change his mind. But then, with a fierce growl, the commander shouted, "Prepare for battle." Panic surged through Jake. "No, please," he cried, but it was too late. Suddenly, the clash of swords filled the air as the two armies collided. Chaos erupted around them, and Jake felt fear grip his heart. He watched as the princesses fought valiantly, their skills shining through the chaos. Jake's instincts kicked in. "We need to separate them," he shouted over the noise. "If we can break this up, maybe we can still talk." The princesses nodded, determination shining in their eyes. They fought their way through the chaos, trying to reach the commander of Voreth. Jake followed closely behind, his heart pounding. Amid the clashing swords and shouts, Jake spotted a small group of Voreth soldiers who were hesitating, unsure of the fight. He rushed towards them, desperation in his voice. "Please, this isn't what we want." As the battle raged on, Jake realized that the real challenge lay not just in the clash of weapons, but in the battle for understanding. Would they be able to turn the tide and find peace amidst the chaos, or would their efforts to unite be lost in the storm of war? The resolution. The chaos of battle surrounded Jake, with swords clashing and shouts echoing in the air. Fear gripped his heart, but he pushed forward, determined to find a way to resolve the conflict. As he fought alongside the princesses, he couldn't shake the feeling that words were more powerful than weapons. "Focus on the commander," Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "If we can reach him, maybe we can stop this madness." Jake nodded, and together they pushed through the crowd, dodging attacks and helping fallen soldiers along the way. The sight of the two armies fighting tore at Jake's heart. He remembered the joy of the recent community event and how they had all come together. They couldn't let that be lost. As they moved closer to the Voreth commander, Jake noticed that some soldiers were no longer fighting. Instead, they stood frozen, confusion and doubt on their faces. Perhaps they, too, wanted peace. "Stay close," Ilara warned, blocking the sword strike with her own. They were nearly there, but the battle raged on around them. Finally, they broke through the fighting and reached the Voreth commander. He was strong and imposing, with an expression of fury on his face. But beneath that anger, Jake could see uncertainty. "Commander," Jake shouted, stepping forward, breathless. "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." The commander's eyes narrowed as he regarded the human. "You think your words can change anything? You're outnumbered." "No," Jake replied, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Look around you. Your soldiers hesitate. They don't want to fight any more than we do. This war is hurting everyone." The commander hesitated, glancing back at his soldiers. He could see fear in their eyes, and for a moment, Jake hoped he would listen. "Your people deserve better than this," Jake continued, his voice steady. "We have built a community that values unity and understanding. Fighting will only bring destruction to both our kingdoms." The tension in the air was thick as the commander considered Jake's words. "What do you propose?" he asked, his voice losing some of its edge. "Let's negotiate." Lyra stepped forward, her voice firm yet calm. "We can share our stories and learn from each other. There's so much we can gain from cooperation instead of conflict." The commander's gaze shifted from Jake to the princesses. He could see their strength and determination, but he was also aware of his own soldiers' anxiety. "And if I agree, what then? My people want victory. They want to see strength." "Strength can come in many forms," Zara replied, her voice confident. "You don't have to win through war. You can lead with wisdom and courage. Your legacy can be one of peace." Jake watched as the commander weighed their words, the tension slowly easing from his shoulders. He could sense that the tide was turning, but they needed to act fast before the fighting resumed. Suddenly, a voice called from the Voreth ranks. "Commander, we're tired. We don't want to fight anymore." A murmur rippled through the Vorath soldiers. One by one, they began to lower their weapons, confusion mixing with relief. Jake felt hope rise in his chest. "See," Jake urged, stepping closer to the commander. "Your people want peace. Together, we can create a future without bloodshed." The commander hesitated, looking at his soldiers, then at the fierce determination of the princesses. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he lowered his sword. "Very well. Let us talk." Cheers erupted from the Zorathian soldiers as they dropped their weapons in relief. The tension that had filled the battlefield moments ago began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of hope. Jake felt a rush of joy. They had done it. The battle that could have torn them apart was transforming into a moment of unity. The princesses exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and triumph. They had taken a risk, and it had paid off. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Jake stepped forward to lead the two sides toward a nearby hill, where they could talk in peace. As the leaders of both kingdoms began to share their stories, Jake realized that this was only the beginning. They had turned a potential disaster into an opportunity for growth and understanding. In that moment, Jake felt grateful. He had come to Zorath as an outsider, but now he felt like a true part of something extraordinary. Together, they were building a future where unity reigned over conflict, and the bonds they had forged would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. A new beginning. The sun rose over the kingdom of Zorath, casting a golden glow on the palace and the surrounding fields. The previous day's showdown had turned into a moment of understanding, and now the atmosphere was filled with hope. Jake stood on the balcony, watching as the villagers and soldiers mingled in the courtyard below, celebrating their newfound peace. "Can you believe it?" Lyra joined him, her voice full of excitement. "We actually did it. We found a way to avoid war." Jake turned to her, a smile spreading across his face. "I still can't believe it. But I think we've just started something amazing." The princesses had called for a council meeting with the Vorath leaders, and both sides were eager to discuss a new path forward. As the day progressed, they gathered in the grand hall, the atmosphere filled with a mix of tension and anticipation. The Vorath commander entered, his posture more relaxed than it had been during the confrontation. He looked at the princesses and Jake, his eyes showing a glimmer of respect. "I must admit, I was wrong to dismiss your words. You showed great courage in the face of conflict." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of pride. "We all want the same thing, a future where our people can live in peace. Let's work together to make that happen." The room filled with conversation as ideas began to flow. The princesses proposed a cultural exchange program, where Zorath and Vorath could share their traditions, stories, and skills. This would not only strengthen their bonds, but also help each kingdom understand the other's way of life. The Vorath commander was intrigued. "We have many unique crafts and stories to share. Our people will appreciate the opportunity to connect with yours." Ilara smiled, her enthusiasm infectious. "And we can learn from your warriors' skills in combat. We may not always agree, but we can support one another and grow together." As discussions continued, Jake felt a sense of belonging wash over him. He had never imagined that his journey to Zorath would lead to something so transformative. What started as a challenge had turned into a partnership that could change the fate of both kingdoms. Days turned into weeks, and the first cultural exchange event was organized in the palace gardens. Both Zorathian and Vorathian villagers gathered, eager to share their talents. Colorful tents filled the space, showcasing crafts, music, and food from both kingdoms. Jake watched as children from each side played together, laughing and learning from one another. "I can't believe how far we've come," Naya said, joining Jake at a nearby booth. "Just weeks ago, we were on the brink of war. Now, look at us." "It's incredible," Jake replied, his heart swelling with joy. "This is just the beginning. We can continue to build on this." As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the festivities, A Vorathian musician began to play a haunting melody. The Zorathians listened in awe, and soon Lyra and Ilara joined in, dancing to the rhythm. Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had come to Zorath as an outsider, but now he was part of something bigger, a community that embraced differences and worked together toward a brighter future. After the music stopped, Jake stepped onto a small platform, wanting to address the crowd. "Thank you all for being here today," he said, his voice ringing out. "What we've created is something special. It's proof that understanding and friendship can overcome even the deepest divides." The crowd erupted in applause, and the princesses smiled at him proudly. As the night continued with laughter, music, and shared stories, Jake knew that they had built a foundation for lasting peace. The road ahead would not always be easy, but together they could face any challenge. In the days that followed, Zorath and Vorath grew closer than ever. Trade agreements were established, and both kingdoms began to flourish in ways they had never imagined. Jake felt a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just a visitor. He was a bridge between two worlds. And as he looked around at the smiling faces of his friends, he knew that this was truly a new beginning for everyone.